also brings up another point. Alex, maybe you can answer this. To me, it seemed like if there was an opportunity for the Republicans to win the presidency, I mean, historically, Obama should have lost. I mean, let's be honest about it. Those numbers really didn't start to show improvement till very late in this election cycle. What do you think was most responsible for Romney losing the election?
I think that, political scientists would say the economy was growing just enough to help, prevent. I mean, I really honestly think Mitt Romney is a hilarious caricature of a Republican. Like, he's a just utterly ridiculous, hilarious character. But on the other hand, like, of the jokers that were lined up in the primaries, he was easily and obviously the best one for the job. So, like, there's a sense where I sort of feel for him in the, like, this should have been my year, it's...
In the cast of the Avengers, he was Robert Downey Jr.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I don't know. Obama was definitely he could have been beaten theoretically by a better candidate. And honestly, if Mitt Romney had picked Rob Portman from Ohio instead of backwards hat Bob Roberts wannabe Paul Ryan, like maybe things would be different right now. Or maybe it'd be the same. But I don't know. I think that it was a partly bad candidate, partly just like Obama had the advantage of a slowly growing economy, and also like the Republican brand is so toxic, they're not going to win. I mean, they've spent how many years now just basically being like, we hate everyone who doesn't look like us, and it's like it's hard to win then undecided's over after all that.
Yeah, although David, you could say, what were the factors that did bring Romney down? Was it himself? Some of the things Alex was talking about. Is the Republican Party itself as an organization? Ken was talking about how the Tea Party really never truly embraced Romney. Do you think it was a Deus Ex Machina, the hurricane coming in, the Chris Christie and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Romney was a fine candidate. He was probably
I thought he was.
He was probably like as good as they could do. Right. I thought in many ways they ran a pretty disciplined campaign in a very weak economy with an embattled incumbent. All of which is to say, like, they have some serious problems with all of those factors. The Republicans.
Do you think he should have addressed the Bain Capital ads more in the?
What could he have done? I mean, the guy was a venture capitalist. There's not a lot of ways to sort of spin that away. I mean, look, I think they probably should have nominated Tim Pawlenty. They would have done slightly better. But I mean, there's just I'm not the first to say this. I mean, there's just not enough middle-aged and older white men in the country anymore, and they have a problem that I don't think they are close to solving. I mean, when I talk to them, they say, Republican operatives, they're actually calling me back these days and saying things like, we have to go get the minorities.
Right.
I'm like, that's a bad sign.
Yeah, you have that's not how to do it, my friend.
Right. A Republican's worst nightmare is a Democrat saying, we're going after middle-aged white men. Right. No, that's all we have left.
I mean, and it's not as if their sort of Hispanic, Asian, African American young women problem is something that can be solved anytime soon. So
can I just say, the weirdest single exit poll stat for me was that Romney lost Asian Americans by like 90%. Because I was thinking, like, were the Republicans even racist against Asians this cycle? Like, did I completely miss something?
Right. Or Asians understand math.
Well, that's
Pretty simple. Can't fool them on that. They're like, nope. Sorry, this shit adds up. Sorry.
I actually thought Romney was a terrible candidate.
Really?
Yeah. I think there was
In what way? What was the worst?
He could not make anyone's heart beat any faster than it was going to beat. There was nothing there.
Right.
I mean,
in the primaries, remember anybody but Romney? That was the
Mitt Zombie. They called him Mitt Zombie in New Hampshire.
I mean, they were crazy about Herman Cain for a while.
I know.
I mean, it looks ludicrous now when you look at that. You know, that 999 was the rallying cry.
Yeah, I think he was a terrible candidate. I think the problem, and I think that gives them some cover now because the next day story is, well, Romney lost it. It was his fault. It wasn't the ideas that are wrong. Well, it's Romney. He wasn't a great candidate, and it gives him a great scapegoat, and he'll go off and be an also-ran.
Now, Ken, do you think, Romney wasn't a good candidate, or did he have to try to fit this, well, I'm going to say reasonable guy, people may disagree, into an unreasonable party? You know,
Well, yeah,
because
I mean,
wasn't he pushed way to the right during the primary?
he was, and
Right.
he had to be. I mean, when you just talked about Herman Cain, and I had utterly forgotten that for a while.
Thank you.
But Rick Perry,
Right.
Newt Gingrich, it was Bachman. It was
Right.
one just full-on nutcase after another, and that to me, the attention, that long drawn-out battle, I think did so much more for Obama than it did for whoever survived. I mean, I know I started out. I would bet it's kind of common in this room, that at the beginning of the campaign, I was like, Obama, maybe we could get a liberal. And you heard that a lot. There wasn't enthusiasm for him. The small donations weren't coming in. They thought he was going to lose the young people and everything else.
Well, once you have a record, too, people have something to really vote on.
But then
right.
you had this incredible clown show on the GOP side. I mean, we've never seen anything like this before. I mean, it just went on and on and on and on. And at the end, you see, it was. I mean, it was great for comedy.
It's good for my profession.
Yeah. And at the end, really, all you knew about Mitt Romney was that by a process of elimination, he was the least offensive character that they could run.
Except I found him terribly offensive, and I vote in Massachusetts, so he was my governor, and he had, in his one measly little term, he was out of the office like 417 days, and Romney here was fabulous. I don't know how anybody can bear that him getting up there and talking about Obamacare. All he had to do was mention that, and I would sort of like slip to the floor. Romney Care was, it's this fabulous thing in Massachusetts. You call up your insurance agency and you say, I need insurance, and they give it to you. And they don't ask you about anything. So I couldn't stand that. And, I think I loved what Stephen Colbert said, which was Romney's platform was, I want to be president.
Yeah. That's what
Yeah.
motivated. That's what motivated
and-
every decision, every platform change.
And toward the end, I said to myself, what has he ever said, some spontaneous answer to anything where you said, whoa, what an intelligent guy.
Oh, I know. The things that Molly Ball, political reporter, put on her Twitter the night she had a brief conversation with him. And she said, how do you feel about tonight? And he said, intellectually, I think we are going to win. And I have feelings that we would win too. and that was the first purely off the cuff thing I'd ever heard him say. Where I'm like, my God, to live in that human costume must be so weird.
I think it's also when you think of Romney as a moderate guy forced into a right-wing box, you have to remember he ran in 2008. And when he ran in 2008, what happened is he looked at the field of candidates. You had McCain, you had Rudy Giuliani. You remember when people thought he might be president? And those were basically the front runners. And he said to himself, in his very sensible but completely disconnected from the way humans think way, he said, well, it looks like there's space here for a far right-wing social conservative. And so despite not ever having been that, he immediately became one and thought that South Carolina voters would be like, yeah, we buy this. He put himself into the box to begin with in 2008, just threw himself happily into the far right-wing box. And then after that, he was always I can just sort of move back later. But it was a voluntary decision to do that.
Right. Now, is that his fault or the Republican Party's fault?
They can share the blame on that one probably.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of, what actually made this election sort of interesting in a way, right? Here was a guy who was actually a sort of technocratic, in many ways, kind of competent, middle-of-the-road governor of Massachusetts, had this accomplishment to bring universal health care to Massachusetts, solved an intractable problem. It is the accomplishment of a lifetime, and he has spent the entire campaign disavowing it, right? Ran so far to the right that he was the Bob Roberts of the 2012 campaign, and then about a month before decided to become the nation's pediatrician. And his voice softened, and he was like, why would I ever raise taxes on the middle class? Who would do that? That's crazy. And everyone's like, yeah, that's totally crazy. You're not going to do that. Right. And I think that it was sort of important in a way, if I can say this, that he lost so that we showed you just can't reinvent yourself every 6 weeks on the campaign trail.
And go ahead, Andrew.
I think there's a bigger meta-narrative
Sure.
also, and that is which I think was the most important thing, really. There were two giant waves that we experienced, the '08 wave and the 2010 wave. And the question this time was, which one can mature into a governing coalition, one that can hang together despite legislative difficulties and real, actual challenges of governing. And what we saw is that the Democrats got a lot accomplished, suffered a lot of losses, but managed to maintain that, whereas the Republicans could not govern. They proved themselves to not be able to govern over the 2 years. And I think that is really the bigger outcome of this election. It seems to me to read that way.